he touched on a lot of economic issues. I was beginning to wonder whether he was also doing a second PhD in finance or in economics. I don't know yet, but all will be revealed to us very soon. But the bishop is coming into our territory. So the bishop should also know that we may also go towards his territory as well. Oh, okay. I was told that we're welcome. So those of us on the laity, please, let's take that into account. So let's see what is happening to us. This newspaper sketch, daily sketch, I think from the age of the people here, I think we will know sketch. I think the younger ones may not know. Petrol was 20 kobo at that time. I think we all know what the price of petrol is now. We all know. But at that time, petrol was 20 kobo. And today, what do we know? What is happening to the price of petrol? Now, this is the sort of headline we all read about in the newspaper. And look at the increases we're experiencing in the price of goods. Rice, beans, yam, gari, pepper, bread. These are day-to-day things we're seeing. Day-to-day things. So the inflation figure came out yesterday at 33.69%. I mean, that's a record for us. And it keeps going up and up and up. And the question is, what do we do about it? How does it affect us? Number one, what is the cause? We need to understand what is the cause of this living crisis. Why is our take-home pay no longer taking us home? I think for a lot of people, that's what I hear. Take-home pay is no longer taking us home. And that's why even the bishop, all the people here that is paying their salary, they're constantly coming to him and saying the take-home pay is not taking them home. Is that the truth? Yes. Bishop, they said yes. So what is the cause of it and what can we do? I mean, how do we navigate ourselves around it? People have different theories as what could be the cause of it, but I'm going to share my thoughts as to what is the cause of it. But more importantly, how do we manage our affairs? How do we manage our affairs so that we don't become too much of a victim of what is going on in the economy? But first, I want to talk about, when we talk about living crisis, cost of living crisis, what do we mean? There are two things that happen to us. We have our income and we have our expenses. So when we say there's a crisis, number one, the income is not as much as before, or the expenses is more than before. Income is less, expenses is more. Now, as it's affecting us individually, it's also affecting the whole of the country. So if we add up all the income of everybody in Nigeria, it's called GDP. So whilst we may not have the data for us individually, we can look at the data for globally in Nigeria and see what is actually happening to our income level. That gives us an idea of, is our income going up or not? And then for expenses, we look at the inflation figure. So let's look at some of the data. So I'll try to share some data so that you can begin to see where the problem is. Look at this graph of our GDP. This is now the income of all of us together from 2020 to 2022. And you can see this is in dollar terms. You can see it got to a peak. It got to a peak in 2014. Got to a peak in 2014, and then from then onwards. So which means in 2014, we produced more than we're producing now in dollar terms. 2014, we produced more than we're producing. So we're not producing as much. It's a problem. As a country, we're not producing as much. And you know, that's why I like when the bishop said we're going to do this empowerment, to empower young people so that they can begin to be more productive. One of the things that I always get very sad is when I'm driving a long journey within Lagos or even outside Lagos. And when you look at the window, you see young people just sitting down, old people, not even young, old people, young people just sitting down, and you're wondering, don't these people have job? Does it not bother you? They're not productive. That's why the figure is going down. Now, we're going to look at the next graph. This is now the GDP per capita. Per capita. Again, it shows the same picture. 2014 was the peak. So, which means as an individual in Nigeria, we are producing less now than we were producing in 2014. We're not a productive country. It's a major problem. Now, the next graph shows the number of people that are poor, that are victims of this so-called living crisis, where we have 133 million suffering from what is called multidimensional poverty, according to our own Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. Then extreme poverty, 95 million, almost 50% of our population, earning less than $2.15 per day. This is World Bank definition of poverty. And then you now have conventional poverty, where almost everybody are very, very poor, not having enough income to take us home. So now let's look at why is our collective output, why are we not productive? What can we do, or what does GDP, what can make it to go up? In economics, there are 4 broad factors that lead to growth in GDP. If you have more land, GDP tends to go up. Labor, capital, and technology. In Nigeria, land, oh yeah, do we have land? Oh, we have plenty of land, don't we? It's a very large country. We're not like an island that does not have land. We have plenty of land, so land is not our problem. Labor, do we have labor? Oh yes, we have labor. We have over 200 million people, so labor is not a problem. Capital, that's financial capital. Do we have financial capital? Yeah, well, even central bank is trying to recapitalize so that the banks will have more capital. Technology. This is where the problem is. We're not using technology in this part of the world. That's why our productivity is extremely, extremely, extremely low. That's why when you go to a building site, you see the abokis all carrying cement and whatever, because we don't use technology. If you ever go to a building site outside this country and you see the way they do construction, you don't see people carrying things on their head because they use technology. Now, our adoption of technology is very, very low. So our productivity is extremely, extremely low. What are the new things happening in technology? We have artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, automation, Internet of Things, augmented and virtual reality. The Western world have even changing the goalpost. We are still battling with power because, you know, fourth revolution, industrial revolution even starts with basic machine. Basic machine we're not even using because we need power. If we don't even have power on a consistent basis, we cannot even move on to the fifth industrial revolution. So we're even struggling with even getting normal machine to work in Nigeria. Not to now talk about where other people have gone way, way, way ahead. So there's a need for investment in technology if we want to become more productive, if we want to increase the level of output in Nigeria. The other graph that I also want to show, I want to relate the output to our population. We also have a bit of a population issue in Nigeria. Before, in 1970, the population of Nigeria, UK, and France was about the same. About 70 million people. No, about 50 million people. About 50 million people in around 1970. But look at what has happened to the UK and France on this graph. You will see that the population has gone to around from 50 to about just under 70 million for both countries. But look at what has happened to our own population. We've gone from 50 million to 220 million within the same period. It's not a problem, but which means we should be producing 4 times more than them if we want to feed the 4 times the population. Our population has grown 4 times. We have to be able to produce 4 times more. This is where the problem is. Our population is growing, but we're not producing enough. I'm not saying we should reduce our population, but it's a problem. The next graph also shows this in another way. You see the population growth of Nigeria, and then we look at the population growth in other countries. You see population growth in Nigeria between about 2.5%. But look at other countries. Yes, some countries are having a bit of a problem. Japan is having negative growth. Italy is having negative growth. But the problem is not the fact that our population is growing. The problem is that we need to produce more. You know, when the bishop was giving his charge, he said something like, you know, when all these people come into Lagos, that we need to feed them. Yes, we need to feed all these people throughout Nigeria, but we need to produce more. If we don't produce more, we're going to have this crisis. So this crisis is actually born out of, if I can use the word, all of us, because we're just not all producing. If we want to deal with this increase in population, we just have to produce a lot more. Now, I've just said a lot about our output. Our output is really nothing to write home about. We're not producing enough. Now, let's go to the expenses. You know, I said income and expenses. Our expenses, which we measure by inflation, keeps going up and up and up. Why is inflation going up? There are broadly 3 possible reasons why inflation goes up. 4 possible reasons. 1, sometimes we have global economic shocks. Global economic shocks affect the cost of things anywhere in the world. The next thing that can happen is, you know, again, the bishop was going into our territory, was mentioning fiscal policy and monetary policy. Okay, so even the bishop knows that. So we have to look at our fiscal policy, we need to look at our monetary policy. But let's look at the global economic shocks, because this global economic shock does affect prices of things. Every decade, there's usually a maximum of 2 economic shocks, roughly. In the 80s, there were 2 economic shocks. In the 90s, there were 2 economic shocks. In the 90s, there were 2. Interestingly, between 2010 and 2019, there was no global economic shock. It was a period of prosperity. Prices of goods all over the world was very low. But in the current decade, we've had 2 economic shocks. We had COVID, and then we had the global inflation crisis. If you remember what happened during COVID, was that a lot of factories were not able to produce. And when they were not able to produce, it then caused, no, please, go back. When they were not able to produce a lot of raw materials all over the world, then we had a lot of issues with that. Then we had the Russian-Ukraine war. When the Russian-Ukraine war happened, energy prices went through the roof, and that caused a lot of raw material all over the world to go up. So there was a global inflation crisis. Statistically, we've never had more than 2. So we pray that we don't have another global economic crisis that may make costs to go through the roof. But we need our prayers, because there's one that is locking round. We've never had more than 2 in a decade, but we have this Israeli-Hamas war that if care is not taken, or if prayers are not being said properly, it may lead to another global economic crisis. So I want to implore that when we pray for world peace, we should always be praying that there will be peace in that region. Because what is happening in that region is beyond human comprehension. Trying to fight Israel when there's a covenant between God and Israel is a bit of a tough one. So I think we have to really pray that even though the world is supporting, the Palestinian, but it's a very tough one. There's a covenant between God and Israel. So we pray that we don't have a third economy. So I want us, my bishop, that when we pray, that we should always be praying that there's peace in that part, because it would affect us here. If there's a crisis and energy price goes through the roof again, petrol price will go up, diesel price will go up, and all our costs will go up. So it is in our best interest to be praying for peace in that part of the world. So now let's look at fiscal condition in Nigeria. So what is fiscal? The bishop luckily has helped me in this area. So fiscal is talking about, the policy of government on income and expenditure, what the government earns and what the government spends. So this is 2024 budget. It shows what they're hoping to earn and what they're hoping to spend. We don't need to go through it, but the only thing we should look at is the deficit between what they hope to earn and what they hope to spend. Every year, we have about 10 trillion gap between what they earn and what they spend. A country is not different from us as individuals. As individuals, we try to cut our cloth according to the size of the cloth, not according to ourselves. So if we earn only 10, we try to curtail our expenses to 10. But the government somehow believes that they can do otherwise. But is it sustainable? And how is it funded? That is where the problem is. Let's look at what has happened to inflation in Nigeria. This is a graph that shows inflation. And you can see that the average is about 14–15% on average over the past 30 years. We've always had high inflation. Yes, we have it very high now, but prices keeps going up. That's why the first slide I showed, petrol at 20 kobo many years ago. So it's a problem we keep having, whether there's global economic shock or there's no global economic shock. We're always having problems with inflation. Now, part of it, as I've said, is because we're not producing. Because if we don't produce, then more mouths will be running after the few products that we're producing. What are the key drivers of inflation? What are the key drivers of inflation? This is a report by IMF that shows that the biggest driver of inflation in Nigeria is our exchange rate, because we import a lot of things. We are very much import dependent for basic goods. Basic goods. Even food, the food we eat, we import a lot of it. Even for the food that we produce locally, we need to bring them from different parts of the country to, say, Lagos. And, well, recently we know that Dangote refinery is now producing diesel. But diesel price is still tied to exchange rate. It's still tied to exchange rate. Mr. Dangote is not a charity organization. He will be pricing his diesel in line with what is happening with the exchange rate. So the more Naira depreciates, the more the cost of diesel will go up. Cost of petrol will also go up. At the moment, we've started subsidizing petrol again, but for how long? Sooner or later, that would also go up. Energy price, what has happened to energy tariff recently? From the 70-something Naira we were paying, it's moved to 225, but it's reduced to 205 Naira per kilowatt hour. So that has also gone up a lot. So exchange rate account is the biggest factor why we have. And then, of course, we know that recently when the new administration came into power, the new CBN governor said he would like the free market forces to be the determinant of exchange rate. That now also made exchange rate to go up. And that's why we saw prices of everything go up quite significantly over the past few months. So you can see this graph shows a graph of inflation rate and exchange rate. And you can see clearly from the graph that there's a linkage. The more Naira depreciates, the more we have inflation. There is a strong, strong link between the two of them. The other factor, apart from exchange rate, is what we call money supply. Money supply, as you can see, from the money supply, you see that our money supply, which is basically the amount of money in circulation, keeps growing. In 2023, our money supply grew at 51%. So what do I mean by money supply? It's just the money around. It's not a problem to have increase in money supply, but the money, don't forget, the money is being used to buy goods. We are measuring the amount of goods we're producing by this matrix called GDP. So if the goods around is growing by only 3.5% per annum, but the total money in circulation is growing by 51%, then we say there's more money chasing few goods. More money chasing few goods. And what happens to the price of those goods? They go up. I can tell you this, that even with the increase in prices, people are still buying. I'll use Coke, Nigerian Bottling Company, as an example. Nigerian Bottling Company, last year, between last year and this year, I think they've increased prices about 4-5 times. But I can tell you that all their products, they are selling them. They are selling. There's nothing left in their warehouse. Everything is being sold. My brother-in-law works there. Everything, despite the increase in price. Why? Because there's a lot of money out there chasing few goods. Unfortunately, some of this money may not be in our pocket, but those that have it, they have it. Those that have it, they have it. A friend of mine was telling me a G-Wagon now costs 490 million. I said 490 million, and the people buying it? Yeah, people are buying it every day. People are buying it. So there's just so much money out there chasing few goods. So money supply, you can see what is happening. Money supply just continues to go up and up and up. Our money, M3 is a way economics measure the amount of money in circulation, and it grew from 53 trillion in February to 95 trillion in February, year on year, 80% growth. And these are figures from, I think from CBN. So now you're probably wondering, how does this money grow? This money supply I've been mentioning. I said money supply. Okay, so there are two ways money grows. One is what we call ways and means. What's ways and means? Well, anytime the government of Nigeria needs more money and there's not enough revenue. I told you there's a 10 trillion gap between the revenue and the expenses. So they'll just call the CBN governor. CBN governor, please, you're the banker to the government. We need another 1 trillion naira. So what the central bank governor does? Well, he just prints more money. That's just as simple as that. So we call it ways and means. We just go to the printing press and we literally just print more naira notes without any correspondent increase in level of production. So we have more money that is chasing few. The goods are not increasing, but we're just printing more money. It's called ways and means. The other way is the banks. Any bank that is licensed by central bank can also, through lending activity, also increase the money. So what can central bank do? So central bank has a mandate, which is to make sure that there's price stability. Inflation is below 10%. is single digit. That's the mandate they've given themselves. Single digit. And you can see they have failed over the past 30 to 40 years because the average inflation rate had always been around 15%. So they have tools, which I don't want to bore you with: cash reserve requirement, treasury bills rate, discount rate, interest on excess reserves. These are the tools, various tools that central bank use to try to manage money supply. So what the current central bank government is now doing is try to tighten or reduce the growth in the money supply. Reduce the growth in the money supply. And that's why we see interest rate rising. Now, recently, interest rate has been going up and up, which is not so good for the people in the productive sector in a way, but it's a way to manage the exchange rate, because if interest rate remains low, unfortunately, exchange rate would also be depreciating. And if you remember what I said exchange rate is the #1 determinant of inflation. The topic of economics is there would always be conflicting ideas over how to solve the problem. So some economics will tell you that no, interest rate should be low. Some economics will say interest rate should be high. So, because some people here would be saying, no, Wale, interest rate, we can't afford interest rate to be high. It should be low so that the cost of production will be low. But what we have found out is that countries that have this belief that interest rate should be low because they want cost of production to be low. And #1 example is Turkey. They also have this belief as well. The president of Turkey does not like high interest rates. And he said interest rate should be low. At the moment, inflation in Turkey, it's a Western country, is 70%. 70%. Ditto for Argentina. Inflation rate in Argentina is about 100%. But they have a new president who believes otherwise, that they should change the policy. But anyway, it's an academic debate between economics. That's why economics have two hands. They will say on one hand, da-da-da, on the other hand, da-da-da. So they're always conflicting stories. But the situation we're in, the central bank governor right now, he believes in what they call orthodox monetary policy. But it provides an avenue for us, an opportunity for us. Because I said, how do we navigate ourselves? What does it mean for us? Interest rate is high. So it's to also encourage more savings. The bishop has always been going on about savings. Amphibobor, Jeun, as the bishop will always say. This is a good opportunity for us to save because interest rate is very high. One of the best means of investing right now are commercial papers. Commercial paper issued by AAA rated company. I'll give one example, Dangote Sugar, which is a AAA rated company. Currently, as we're speaking, they have a commercial paper that they have issued, commercial paper, at 25% interest rate. 25%. No bank will give you 25% interest rate. 25% interest rate. Your money is safe with Mr. Dangote. You can be rest assured, with that. So these are ways we can navigate, because we can't change a lot of things. What are the variables we can change? We can invest our money wisely. We should save. We should save for rainy days. And we should save and earn good interest on our money. So that whichever way the economic blow, the wind, as it blows the economy left and right, we come out on top. So that's why I want to just mention that this is what we should take away from this presentation. The next slide shows what I was discussing earlier on about looking at countries and looking at interest rate and looking at inflation. You will see from this table that countries always make sure that the interest rate is usually higher than the inflation rate. Interest rate is always higher than inflation rate. Japan is an exception. Japan belongs to a totally different category. You can have a one-day discussion on Japan, but Japan is just very, very different. So I don't want to talk so much about Japan. But look at the three countries at the bottom. Argentina has an inflation rate, it's actually 276%. Nigeria, 33.69%, and Turkey, 68.5%, but it's gone up to 70% now. And you can see that those three countries always have the inflation rate higher than the central bank rate. So it's just some information. Okay, so what's the outlook going forward? The central bank made a comment that it would like Nigeria to be a $1 trillion economy by 2030. By 2030, a $1 trillion economy. We are currently just around $400 billion. And for that to happen, we will need to grow. We need to grow our economy by 10% every year. 10% every year. Right now, we're growing at about 2%, 3% every year. You can see that it's unlikely, statistically, to be able to get to that destination. He has a vision, but I don't think, from what we're seeing here, we can achieve that. But where do we come in? We need to produce. There's no other thing we need to do other than to produce. So what are my thoughts about what we need to do going forward as a country? I think one of the problems is our growth in money supply. Unfortunately, when we had a change in government, our belief was that the new economic team would dampen, the excessive expenditure. I think the problem most of us see is that the expenditure of the federal government and even state government, they're not all productive. If they were productive, it would have been a different matter. But they're not all productive. There is a lot of wastage. I'm sure you all know that. And so I'm a bit fearful that this current government will continue to print money. There will continue to be excess money supply. And central bank, so whilst the government is pressing the accelerator and putting fuel in the injection pump, central bank is at the same time trying to press the brake. So we just hope that the vehicle will not somersault. But that is really the description of what is happening in Nigeria. So unfortunately, we expect higher growth in money supply, which central bank will use interest rates to try to dampen. So we should enjoy higher interest rates for quite a while. Because unfortunately, our GDP growth is not higher than our money supply. So that's why central bank is using what is called a restrictive money supply growth in order to address the issue. And on the medium term, we believe that the government also needs to be very serious about increasing taxes to raise revenue. And when I say increase tax, I don't mean that those of us that are paying tax, that our tax rate should go up. That's not what I mean. There are a lot of people who are not paying taxes, and it's not the poor people. Unfortunately, it's the rich people that are not paying taxes. Why is that? Because the tax code is written by the rich people. So because of that, they don't pay, they write it in such a way that they don't pay taxes. I will give you an example. I will not name the person. But the person happens to earn, I think, about 10 billion naira in dividend from a bank he's the chairman of. You can figure it out. His dividend is 10 billion naira. How much tax does he pay on 10 billion? It's just one person, no. His dividend in one company alone is 10 billion. Meanwhile, income tax rate in Nigeria is roughly about 20% when you factor in the allowances. It's about 20%. So for those of us that are earning money from our businesses and you're paying tax legitimately, you pay 20% of your income as tax. And here is somebody who just collects dividend and is paying only 10%, 1 billion. Yeah, it's a lot of money, but it's 10%. I think it's unfair. Don't you think so? Because not as if he needs the money, but why should he be paying 10% when those of us that it's a way of discouraging people from working hard when somebody or whatever. And then there's also something called capital gains. If you earn money on capital gains, you don't even pay any tax. Why should you not pay tax on capital gains tax? Why should we be belaboring people who are sweating to earn money? There seems to be some unfairness in the way our tax is written. It is very, very unfair. If we are very serious as a nation, there are ways of increasing the tax revenue. And I did not say increase tax burden on poor people. It is on the rich people. The rich people are not paying their fair amount of tax. There's a very rich man called Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett always used to say that his tax rate is cheaper than his secretary. Why should that be? Why should he? He's the third or fourth richest man in the world. And he's always complaining to the government that why should my tax rate be lower than my secretary? I'm the fourth richest man in the country. My tax rate should be more. Not the tax rate. It should be more. It's the same thing in Nigeria. So because the rich people are the ones that write the tax code. Are they here, the rich people? Okay, they're not here. Okay. So I won't be crucified. Then we need to remove leakages in government expenditure, and we also need to remove supply constraints because there are a lot of things that could be produced, but things like security affect production, and then better road infrastructure as well. Because when you're moving goods, transportation cost accounts for more than 50% of the cost of goods by the time it gets to Lagos because of very, very bad, road. So, in conclusion, I think we need more entrepreneurs so that we can make things in Nigeria. And my prayer is that as a country and as a people, as a church, we will continue to encourage more and more people to be entrepreneurs. There is a lot of demand for goods, a lot of demand for goods, a lot of demand for food, but production is low. Production is low. If once we're doing our CSI, we should also tilt more towards production-oriented rather than service-oriented. A lot of us prefer service-oriented businesses, but we need to go more into production. All of us cannot be in service. I'm an accountant, but who am I accounting for if everybody is just doing service? We need to go more into production. We need to make things. We need to use our hands to make things, So we need more production in Nigeria. We need more entrepreneurs. The church should pray that in Nigeria, we should have more entrepreneurs. There's no reason why anybody should be not hungry, because there is demand for products, but there are very few people willing to produce. That is the issue. So that is what we need to pray for. And we should also be proud to buy made in Nigeria products. When you go to supermarket, and you see made in Nigerian product and made abroad product, pick the one that is made in Nigeria. By that way, we'd all be doing ourselves a lot of favor. I'm very much proudly made in Nigeria. I myself, I was made in Nigeria. Yes, I'm made in Nigeria. So I would always be buying products that are made in Nigeria. Even if it's not excellent, I will always be buying products made in Nigeria. And I also advise to the influencers, if anybody has connections with people that can influence things. If I had connection with Tinubu, the only advice I would tell him, if I had just privilege of speaking to him for 1 minute, I would say you're an influencer. Whatever you do, everybody will follow. I would say from now onwards, that change the car that you use from, I don't know, I guess he uses a Toyota brand. I know Chief Adedeji will not be happy with what I'm about to say. But I would say use Innocent. Yes, use Innocent. If, just imagine, we see the president of Nigeria driving a made-in-Nigerian car. What do you think that would signal, that would send to everybody? It will send to the everybody, hey, your guy is driving Innocent, we better also drive a made-in-Nigerian car. And that is the way it would work. So, on that note, I would like to thank the Bishop, Lord Bishop, for the privilege of sharing my thoughts, and I hope I have passed some message across. Thank you, my Lord Bishop.
Thank you. You come and sit down. I want to give 1 or 2 people opportunity to ask. The lawyers will say they are the only one that is learned, but all of us are educated. Being educated is saying you have knowledge in other fields other than your own. That's the meaning of being educated. I listen to lawyers, I listen to medical practitioners, I listen to people from various fields. When I sit down with architect Benga Babinti, we talk about mixing block, mixing this, because I don't want to be novice or be ignorant in any of, I may not be an expert, but I should have an experience in all. That is what makes you to be educated. Because the lawyers will tell you they are the only learned people. So we are also educated so that we have idea from other places. I will still invite Wale to the clergy school or clergy meeting, because we also need this information. Information is power. And what you don't know, you don't know. And I thank God that at least he has been able to say the importance of saving. You don't hit with all hands. And when you have saved, how do you multiply it? How do you ensure that it's not slipping? And for better tomorrow, we all need to cultivate that idea of prudency and of being futuristic in whatever we do. We take that one question. Give it to somebody here. So that's it. 2 questions only, because we are going, we still have a lot to do. Thank you, sir.
My Lord Bishop, I want to appreciate you for inviting our brother. I've been asking questions, trying to know what led to inflation, scarcity in the 60s and 70s, and that trajectory was not overcome even when Udoji was around. There's this playwright who sang Kosowolo Day in the 60s, 70s, Adeola Akisayawo. Adeolu. Yes. If he sang that song then, I don't know what he wants to sing now. That's always been my problem. But when he presented the GDP charts that I saw was ridiculously low in the 80s compared to the 2000s. Yet, there is inflation. Inflation had been on the increase. Now, profiling solution, I think, yes, production is the key. But I also want to believe that this area of influencers will even go a long way to bring solution to our problem. In the early 70s, people would tell you, remember the child of whom you are. But all those influences have gone to the drain, and people are reckless with the way we live our lives. So I think the church will need to do more in those two areas. We are thinking church cannot produce. I don't believe so. If the church rolls out farming schemes and the rest, I don't think it's too out of what we can do. I think the church should also consider production. But this area of influencers that is our domain, I think we'll need to do really extremely good with it. Thank you, my Lord.
Yours is a contribution. Let's hear one more. Wale is a member of Synod. He's one of my appointees. He can still be consulted. He can be called anytime.
Thank you. Thank you, my Lord. Mr. Wale, I thank you so much for this great exposition. My name is Chuks Matthew Okwosa, St. James Satellite Town. I want to take a lead with what my father in God, George, just said. The truth of the matter is that the society has failed us, or the government has failed us. And it's high time the church stepped in and solved the problem of the people. Sincerely speaking, Mr. Wale, when you say, let the church pray, let us keep praying. For God's sake, the church is a full-fledged organization. We have every arm, we have human resources, we have professionals. It's high time we begin to galvanize them and get purposeful leadership in every walks of life to at least mitigate in the needs of our people. So the church should be productive. I wrote something, I don't know why it was not answered, but I'm looking up to a time when the church will stop collecting assessments, and because we will have production, we will have no need for them. Let us also encourage our parishes to do same, invest, diversify. Let it be genuine investments, and they will grow, and we will have no need. This is the time that people are running to the church. If they come to the church and there is nothing to be a succor for them, then we are in a bigger problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a brilliant presentation. Thank God for the crop of Synod delegates that we are having. I appreciate the churches for the quality members given to us. Let's take the last one at the back. All that you have been saying to me, you are contributing to what Wale has said. Give to anybody there.
My Lord, thank you, the presenter of this program. I'm Gochko Ezurike from Ikotuna Chirikinri. We have heard so much he spoke about production, investment. I think the problem we have in the country today is insecurity. Before 2019, my team where I work, we are supposed to visit some states in the north, touring the agricultural investments. But today, they are all story. Before now, we are hearing about rice pyramid and all that more. Today, we can no longer talk about that. Before now, many people have farms here and there where they are supposed to go and produce. How would they do that now with the level of insecurity in this country? We are talking of production. What are we going to produce that is not starting from the land production? So I think the church should raise its voice higher. Let the government hear. And something seriously has to be done on the area of insecurity. You see some people, like our presenter said, young men clustered here and there. Some of them could have gone to the farm to do one or two things for production. You hear government officials traveling out, they want to bring investors, do that and do that. What are they coming on? What are they coming to invest on? So I think with the high level of insecurity, we may be deceiving ourselves on the issue of investing and not investing. Thank you, sir.
All our comments, and they are very, very useful comments. And on your behalf, I want to appreciate Brother Wale. He's a very long time friend. We've been coming more than 30 years. We met when we were boys. We are growing old now. But we thank God for everything. We'll still call you. I've told you, you must have a session with my priest, and I will tell you area that you should place, cover. We also need this, and everybody needs it. My privileged office has exposed me to many of you, and I believe so much now that I can talk very well and express myself. It may not be as advanced as you, because the man talking is an accountant, he's also a lawyer, he's an economist. This small head is carrying too many things. The Lord will bless you in Jesus' name. Please put your hands together for him as he goes back. Thank you very much for all you do for us. He's also a board of governor of Adegbite University. He's a chairman of Adegbite College Grammar School at Ibadan and a member of the board of governor of our home school at Idimo, Adegbite Anglican College. Thank you very much for all you do. We need to do two things in quick succession, and I will call my chancellor to please handle that aspect before we go into the last work of the day. We may extend 6 p.m., but it's for good and for us to move on. That's why we are here.
My Lord Bishop and President of Synod,